Well, hello everybody. Welcome. It's Saturday morning. Thank you so much for coming by and hanging out here at Redfish Bluefish. This is the channel where we examine art, nature, science, and we do it through the lens of the aquarist. We have a fantastic show lined up for you this Saturday. We're going to dip a little bit into science. We're not going to go too deep, not going to go too crazy. But before we do that, we're going to have to keep with our long-standing tradition here at Redfish Bluefish, and we're going to honor the first 10 people who were here in chat long before the live stream even began. It's a little thing that we call our top 10 early bird shout out. So we're going to get started. Not going to waste any time. We've got a lot to cover today, and it's going to be pretty interesting. In first place this time we have Gina French. Congratulations, Gina French, and thank you so much for your support, your love, and all of that comes with it. We really appreciate it. In second place, we have Leah Jet. Leah Jet, thank you so much. Third place, we have Color Guppies. Color Guppies, man, congratulations. Fourth place, we had Carmo's Creations. Carmo, a neighbor of mine, thank you so much. And shouting out at you from across the water, my friend. In fifth place, we had EJ Fishes 76. Thank you so much, my friend. Sixth place, we had Jeffrey Watts. Nice, Jeffrey Watts. Thank you so much. In seventh place, we had Mr. Kevin Leong. Kevin, thanks so much, man. I appreciate you showing up here early and asking questions and engaging with us. It's a lot of fun. In eighth place, we had Anthony's Fishy Friends. Man, he was burning the midnight oil last night. He was up late. I was watching some of their stuff on YouTube, and I'm surprised to see him up already this early. You are a beast, my friend. Congratulations, Anthony. Ninth place, we have Laura Sutton. Nice, Laura. Thank you so much for coming by and showing your support. You're here every single live stream. I can't thank you enough. And 10th place, this is definitely the first time we've had this person placed in the top 10 early birds, Sunset Jen. Thank you so much, Sunset Jen. Really appreciate you coming by and showing your support from all the way over down under in Australia. Sunset Jen had to cut out and get some shut-eye, and I know what that feels like when you're badly in need of some. So guys, we're going to jump in, and we're going to start off discussing disease vectors. What are disease vectors? What do they mean? You guys have probably heard of them with the current challenges, the pandemic that's going on, COVID-19 and all that stuff. I would be very surprised if you have not heard repeated references to disease vectors. Basically, all a disease vector is well, let me explain it this way. Lyme disease, right? That's a nasty disease that people get. It's bad stuff. It's really hard to get rid of. Lyme disease is spread primarily, almost exclusively, I believe, by ticks. So ticks are a vector for Lyme disease, right? Similarly, I'm sure you guys learned in the 14th century history, Europe, all that, the bubonic plague, right? The Black Death. That was caused by a bacteria that was spread almost exclusively, again, by the bite of fleas that had infected sick animals. And the fleas would jump off the animals and jump on people and bite them, and then, yikes, you are going to get sick. So again, talking about vectors, fleas would be a disease vector for bubonic plague. So basically, a vector is just anything really that can spread a disease. Now, some of them are really, really obvious. We just talked about some. Everybody knows. Malaria. Mosquitoes are a vector for malaria, right? Lyme disease. Ticks are your vector. Bubonic plague. Thank God that stuff's mainly gone, I believe. Fleas were a disease vector for bubonic plague. Now, we're a bunch of fish nerds. We're a bunch of hobbyists, right? Let's talk about vectors that can affect our fish room, that can affect our fish store, our fish shop. Maybe we're talking about, maybe you deal with, maybe you work in a fish import or a fish export facility. These same disease vectors are going to be troublesome for you from time to time if you don't keep up on your game. So I wanted to talk a little bit, open this up with disease vectors that affect aquarists, freshwater and saltwater, both. So I'm going to ask a question, then I'm going to scroll up in chat and make sure I haven't missed anything already. I'm going to ask you guys, in your opinion, I'll give you the answer here in a second, but give me what you think the correct answer is. What is the #1 disease vector for fish rooms, fish stores, fish shops, LFSs, whatever you want to call them, import-export facilities, fish breeding facilities, any of those situations, places I just mentioned? What is the #1 disease vector in those places? And I'm going to jump over in chat while you guys type what you think your answer is, what you think the correct answer is into chat. Got a question here from Kevin Leong. How do you treat plants before you put them in tanks then? I know Corey says you don't really need to. Okay, Kevin, we're gonna get on that. We're gonna get on that right now. In fact, I have some props to show you guys, some things that I use, some things that could be very helpful. Angler Allen, thank you for coming by. Appreciate it. Keith Hanshaw, Natural Aquariums. I mean, so many awesome people here. IHSP's Tank Tribe. W. Marion. Nice, guys. Thanks so much for coming by and hanging out. Please remember to mash that thumbs up if you don't mind. I'm gonna scroll back down in chat now and see if anybody popped in the correct answer. The question was, what is the #1 disease vector for fish rooms or fish shops or fish stores or breeding facilities, anything like that? And I already see it's not exactly what I was looking for, but it sure is close. It's more than close enough. Okay, we're gonna get here. Here we go. Leah Jet, you got it. Leah Jet says, #1 vector is your hands. Well, it can be hands. Really, the #1 vector in any, disease vector, I should say, in any fish room, any facility, fish shop, is human beings. Yes, us. We are the #1, without question, #1 disease vector in aquaria, in fish keeping, whether it's saltwater or freshwater, whether it's aquascapes, plants, fish, shrimp, snails, doesn't matter. This guy and all you out there are the #1 disease vector in any kind of aquarium facility. Now, that's kind of obvious. I think it is. And there are other questions in here, and they weren't exactly what I was looking for, but they too can absolutely be disease vectors. We're going to get into those. Now, there are some obvious disease vectors, right? And we're going to hit on those right now. Leah Jet, again, congratulations and good job on hitting the #1, what I consider obvious disease vector. Hands, us. You know, not watching what we're doing. Maybe we move something to there, we're moving too quickly, and we're spreading stuff, right? So humans are the #1 disease vector. Now, let's talk about some other obvious ones. Fish, right? Fish can be great disease vectors. Anybody who's ever gotten fish in and didn't really, you know, we've all done it. Every fish keeper. I don't know any single fish keeper, and I know many of them. I don't know any single one who can honestly say, I've never failed to quarantine something properly, or I've never failed to do X or Y or Z, and I've never gotten burned by it. I've never known one. And I just wouldn't buy it if I heard it probably anyways, to be honest with you. So some obvious disease vectors, fish, right? Sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. We didn't have that quarantine tank set up in time, or whatever. It could be anything. And we don't really follow our own rules, steadfast, hard fast rules, I should say, about quarantining fish. Fish can be very, very good disease vectors. So that's an obvious one. Another really obvious one, nets. Fish nets, you know, you put a net in one aquarium, you move a fish somewhere, you're not using net soak or net dip or even bleach water or anything like that. Nets are a fantastic way to spread diseases between tanks once they get into your facility, right? Here's another really good one, and I think that maybe some people miss this. It falls on my obvious list. Filtration. Filters. Everybody's done this from time to time, right? You got a new aquarium, new sponge filter in it, new substrate, it's barely had water in it for an hour or two, maybe at that, and next to it you got a whole bunch of other aquariums that are nice and cycled out and all. You grab a sponge filter or two maybe from one of your well-cycled aquariums and you put them in there, you squeeze them, or maybe you just take one of the new sponge filters from your new aquarium and you put it into an already cycled sponge, an already cycled aquarium, and then you take that sponge from that already cycled aquarium and you move it over. A lot of people do it. I do it. I will do it. I've done it 100 times. That is a really great way to inadvertently and accidentally spread disease throughout your fish room or your facility. Filters. Why? Well, why filters? Well, because you're dragging water through them, whether they're air-driven or electricity-driven, like hang on the back filters, or some, I don't know, internal corner filters, something like that. Water is getting dragged through the media, and as such, right? And as such, pathogens are getting dragged through the filter media, and some of them are in there for sure. So filtration can be really, really bad for spreading pathogens. I see a question here. Kevin Leong says, I preemptively treat my fish with the co-op's Med Trio, but don't know what to do for plants. We're going to get to that, Kevin. No worries at all. Hopefully you'll be leaving this live stream with some good information. Okay, now those were the obvious ones. Let's talk about some of the not so obvious ones, some of the not so obvious disease vectors, okay? Tank splash. There's a really obvious one and people miss it all the time, okay? When you set aquariums up really close to each other, I do it. I mean, look at these aquariums here. Like, they're really close to each other. Now they're all covered, right? They all have lids, very tight-fitting lids. Now, when you have aquariums, especially in fish rooms, aquariums really close to each other, right? And you don't have lids on them, and especially if you're pushing air through sponge filters for filtration. There's nothing wrong with doing that. However, you are definitely creating tank splash between your aquariums, little tiny droplets of water that pop up and, you know, dance between the aquariums. After, you know, less than a day of running, let's say, 3 aquariums or even 4 aquariums side by side with sponge filters running, for instance, you know, air's coming up and bubbles are popping on the surface of the water, I guarantee you that all of the water in those 3 aquariums in this example have been exchanged with each other. Not 100% of the water, of course, that would be impossible, but a significant amount, a significant enough amount of water will have been exchanged, so you will almost be guaranteed to be spreading pathogens between those aquariums if they're present, So that is one of the not so obvious ones. Another one, specimen containers, right? Specimen containers, so whether you use jars, you DIY jars, or little Deleuze specimen containers. I've got a ton of them around here in the shop. Those are fantastic disease spreading vectors that a lot of people miss, right? Dunk them in weakened, you know, bleach water or net soak or something like that. Just take care of your specimen containers because they will absolutely spread disease if you're not careful. Chevy fish, you're hitting a couple of them right there. Good job, Chevy fish. I appreciate that. That was going to be the very next thing I mentioned. Tubing and especially gravel vacs. Any kind of gravel vac rig. Horrible, horrible, horrible for spreading disease. It's a disease vector for sure. Why is tubing and gravel vacs, why are they particularly good at being a disease vector in our fish room? Well, it's because they have tubing, right? And if you've ever run a gravel vac for a while, you know, you run it for 2, 3, 4 aquariums or whatever, you're done with it. You drain it as best you can and you coil it up and you throw it in your fish room. Look over at that hose that you just coiled up. There's still water in it. There's still water in it, and there will be water in it for a long time. And let me assure you guys, you know me, I have a science, technology, engineering, mathematics background professionally. I assure you that pathogens can live, certain pathogens can live outside of water for quite some time. Fungi, bacteria, they long evolved to reproduce with spores. Now spores, fungal spores, bacterial spores, some of them are very, very good at living outside of water for prolonged periods of time, right? And as soon as they hit water, they are active again. There are quite a few pathogens that can do that. That is why, like airline tubing, if you use airline tubing and you get some water in it, especially gravel vacs, don't mean to pick on them, but they're horrible disease vectors, and they're not all that obvious to a whole bunch of aquarists. Now, we're going to get to the main star, basically, of today's live stream. The final entry in my not so obvious vector list for spreading disease is plants. Plants, plants, plants. Plants are actually in ways worse than fish at spreading disease and pathogens. Now, give me it before you just say this guy doesn't know what the heck he's talking about. Let me go on ahead and explain myself by making a comparison between plants and fish, okay? Fish, in a way, actually have dual immune systems, right? Everybody knows fish have an internal immune system just like we do, right? They have an immune system, they have white blood cells. White blood cells, they have highly specialized cells called macrophages that go out and seek, pathogens and literally attack them and eat them up, signaling proteins that set off inflammation, all kinds of things. Same things that happen in our bodies happen inside of fish's bodies. So they have very robust internal immune systems, no question. They also have an external immune system. Yes, fish do. And what is that? Well, that's the fish's fish slime, right? That's a mucosal coating on the fish. It's essentially just that. It's mucus, but it contains a couple of things that other mucus doesn't. And I know it's kind of gross talking about this stuff, but it's science, right? And it's important to us as fish keepers. We need to know this stuff. Fish slime contains two things that really no other animal does. Number one, it contains a really high amount of unusual polysaccharides that aren't found anywhere else. And it contains an unusually high amount of something called peptides, highly specialized peptides, that again aren't found really anywhere else, not in those numbers and not of that type. What are polysaccharides? They're very complex long-chain sugars. That's all you need to know. And peptides are very complex long-chain proteins. Okay, now I wouldn't blame you if you said, whoa, 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 hold on a second, Jason. You said that fish slime is great as a kind of a secondary immune system. But it sounds to me like sugars and proteins, which is present in high numbers in fish slime, would be a smorgasbord, right? A buffet to pathogens. No, you'd be wrong. Not these peptides and not these polysaccharides. These are highly specialized, and they have a very high level of antimicrobial activity. So fish slime works basically two ways. And then we'll move on to plants in our comparison. Number one, the fish slime coating will literally encase and engulf pathogens, freezing them in place in the fish slime, in the mucus, basically. Once they're frozen in place, right, then the polysaccharides and the peptides go into action and basically destroy the pathogens. And there really aren't very many bacteria, viri, that sort of thing that can really withstand fish slime. It is extremely effective as a secondary immune system for fish. Now, let's move on from fish. Plants. We know that plants have quite a robust but weird immune system. We know that they have a vascular system, right? They breathe, they respire, they change things into other things, right? They absorb sugars, they love eating sugars, they exchange sugars for other nutrients that they need between bacteria and fungi and their roots. So plants do a lot of things. They don't have eyes, right? But they do know what light is. They do need light. They're plants, right? Now, plants do not have an external immune system at all. They don't have a slime coating whatsoever. In fact, plants, except for a few plants, very few, and we won't go into them, plants really don't have much of any external defense system. Certainly most aquatic plants don't. So for that reason, in a way, in more than one way, plants are actually better vectors or spreaders of disease than are fish in a lot of cases. So we're going to go into that a little bit more. What we can do, what I fully recommend that people do. All right, things that we can do to mitigate the risk of contaminating our aquariums with infected plants. So the number one big thing is always going to be quarantine. Quarantine, quarantine, quarantine. I saw a question earlier in comment. I saw a comment earlier in the comment section saying that it has been recommended that quarantining plants is really not necessary. I completely disagree. I could not disagree more, and that is what we're here to discuss. Actually, let me fix my window here. There we go. Completely disagree. Now, some people don't quarantine plants. It's true. Now, a lot of others do. A lot of other people, let me back up a little bit. If you're getting tissue cultured plants, then there's no need whatsoever to quarantine them. They're grown in vitro. They can't be contaminated with snails or algae or pathogens, that sort of thing. They just simply can't because they're in vitro. They're tissue cultured, right? Another thing to talk about when quarantining plants, a lot of people make a mistake. They just set up a tank with, I don't know, just regular gravel in it. Just not even, there's no nutrition in it whatsoever, just regular gravel and just water. And they get some plants in, and they quarantine the plants in that by just plugging it into the gravel and not even really fertilizing the water column or doing anything. Please don't do that. The plants that you're quarantining absolutely need nutrition. They need to eat. They need to be taken care of just like other plants. You don't necessarily need to use an aqua soil when you're quarantining your plants in your plant quarantine tank, although it would be good to use if you can swing it. You can use aquarium gravel as long as, I would recommend you put plenty of plant root tabs in the bottom of it, in the bottom of those, in the bottom of your substrate, at the bottom of your gravel. Now, another thing, depending on the plant that you got in, you may or may not need to consider injecting CO2 for that plant. Now, I get it, some people aren't into it. I am into CO2, I've done it both ways. If you're bringing in plants, for instance, let me think about something. Most of the Rotala macrandras, okay, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, are going to need some CO2 supplementation, otherwise they're not going to grow correctly. The new shoots on them are going to fail basically, and they'll stop growing, and then they'll start putting out new shoots from the bottom. Those too will fail, and then eventually they'll start collecting algae. That's just one example of what can go on. Please don't forget that your plants need nutrition. They still need their macronutrients, their micronutrients. I've said it before in my live streams. A lot of people, they consider that there's really three macronutrients for plants, right? Your N, your P, and your K. Your nitrogen, your phosphorus source, and your potassium. There's actually more than that. What about carbon, right? That's a major macro element. It's just that we don't really consider carbon because it's just in the air. But carbon dioxide doesn't naturally diffuse into water very well. Another macro element, and I'll move on from that people don't consider a lot of times that plants do need is oxygen. Oxygen, especially at night when the lights go off. Plants begin respiring oxygen. They don't breathe CO2 anymore. It slows way down. So let me jump over to my notes and see where I'm going with this. Ah, yes, quarantining. Again, some people say you don't really have to quarantine. You can just treat the plant with one thing or another and then pop it right into your aquarium. I do not recommend you do that because I really know what I'm doing with plants and with disinfecting them and that sort of thing. I'm a pretty heavy plant guy. I myself have gotten burned by treating plants and not quarantining them, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here. So let's talk about kind of method number 2. Let's just call it method number 2 for trying to mitigate the risk of getting a bad case of the caca in your aquarium from plants that you're bringing in. Well, number 2 would be a pre-soak upon arrival, right? Pre-soak. I'm seeing some great comments here. I'll get to them. We got a comment here, alum dip. Yeah, that's quite effective. But a pre-soak upon arrival is what I'm going to touch on next. So there's nothing wrong with the first thing I'm going to suggest, and most people use it. They use a 5% bleach solution, just normal, any old everyday household bleach, right? Which is, they range in percentage strength. But most bleach is mostly water. So just go ahead and get yourself some regular household bleach. You don't want to get any of the bleach that has other stuff added to it, like fresh scent bleach or this bleach. No. You just literally want regular household bleach with no other additives in it. And what you do is you add 1 part of that ordinary household bleach to 19 parts of room temperature water. So that's 5%. That's going to be 5%, whichever way you want to consider it, right? So 1 part of household bleach to 19 parts of water. And what you would want to do is you want to soak your plants for really no more than 3 minutes tops. 3 minutes tops. Because, and this is a big because, bleach is very, very high in pH. Very high. I mean, well north of 10, sometimes 10.5 pH. pH. Pardon me. That's very, very high on the basic end of the pH scale, on the alkaline end of the pH scale, right? And if there's one thing that I had to pick that plants really don't dig, it's high pH. They do not like it at all, right? Most plants are not at all evolved to deal with really high pH situations. So that is why I caution you guys, a 5% bleach solution can be quite effective for dipping your plants in. But do not leave them in there for, I'd say, 3 minutes, again, tops. Don't do any more than about 3 minutes, all right? Because the pH is quite high. Now, what you could do, what you can expect to gain from using bleach, right? It's gonna absolutely take out bacteria. It's gonna take out fungi. It's gonna take out any kind of viruses that are on it. It's gonna take out planaria. It's gonna take out hydra. Hydra are big time hitchhikers on plants. In fact, if I had to choose the 2 things that ride in most, well, 3 things actually, that ride in on plants, right, that I do not dig at all. Number 1 would be hydra. Number 2, unwanted snails. That's a huge thing with plants, especially if they were sold to you out of an aquarium. And let's see, what would be number 3? Number 3 for me is actually something that I have struggled with from time to time. It often infects plants and doesn't show signs of it right away. Cyanobacteria. Cyanobacteria is very, very good at invading the tissues of plants and riding through their vascular system. And the plants take at least several days, if not more, to start, exhibiting signs of cyanobacterial infection. So cyanobacteria, at least external cyanobacteria, is absolutely going to be taken out by this diluted bleach soak. Now, let me touch on one thing that it may not take out. It may not take out all snails, right? I have come across some strains of bladder snails that easily withstand the 5% bleach solution. And the second thing that will absolutely withstand a bleach soak are snail eggs. Snail eggs. Why? Well, we just touched on it with fish slime, right? Fish eggs. Snail eggs are basically pond snails, bladder snails. They lay them on plants almost always in a little glob of mucus, right? Again, that gross mucus stuff that the eggs are encased in are there to protect the eggs. And they do a pretty good job of protecting eggs against bleach. So again, to touch on that, great for bacteria, fungi, viri, hydra, planaria, all kinds of external parasites and critters and stuff. Kill some snails, not all. It definitely doesn't take out snail eggs at all. Okay, so we're going to move on to the second thing that a lot of people use to soak their plants with, all right? And I've got some right here in front of me. You can pick this up in any hardware store. Well, most any hardware store. It's Leisure Time Spa 56 chlorinating granules. I'll move it a little bit closer so you guys can see it. I picked this up at an Ace hardware store. What this is Spa Shock. This is Spa Shock. It's pretty much pure sodium dichloroisocyanurate, or NADCC. What this is again, spa shock, hot tub shock. You can also shock swimming pools with it. People use this to shock their spas and swimming pools and hot tubs with over bleach. Why? Well, I can tell you that this absolutely releases tons of free chlorine into the water, tons of it, just like bleach does. But people use this over bleach because remember what I said, what bleach does? It rocks the pH of water up really, really high. It's very, very bad for that. pH is extremely high. It's extremely alkaline. This is actually pH neutral, and in solution, it's in fact mildly acidic, which is quite beneficial to virtually all plants, right? So this does pretty much the same thing that a diluted bleach solution will do. It will take out everything that a bleach solution will. It also takes out some snails, not all, and it unfortunately doesn't have any effect at all on their eggs. And I know that's a big bummer because a lot of people struggle with getting snail eggs off of their plants, right? And we're going to touch on really the best and only way I know of here in a little bit. But there you go. To touch on that again, sodium dichloroisocyanurate. It's very inexpensive. You can get it in pretty much any hardware store, especially hardware stores or pool shops, that kind of things that specialize in pool stuff. You will definitely find NADCC there for sure. Now, before I move on, I'm going to jump over into chat and see if I've missed anything. Please, guys, remember to @redfish_bluefish with questions or comments. It really helps it stand out, just like Kevin Leong is doing. That's awesome. I appreciate that, Kevin. Okay, here we go. Kevin Leong with a question. I have like 15 tanks and 8 would need CO2 suggestions. We'll see if I have time. There are a lot of CO2 injectors out there. Gosh, what is it called? CO2 Art. They make good ones. There are quite a few. Milwaukee Instruments, they make a really good one. Now, a drawback to the Milwaukee Instruments, you can only put one bubble counter on there, so you can't, I don't believe you can use theirs with a splitter system. Really your best bet with a really decent CO2 injection system like diffuser, splitter, anything like that, is really just use Google, because there are some brutal reviews on kind of so-so mediocre CO2 systems. People do not hold back when it comes to a really cruddy CO2 system. I've noticed that. They can be brutal, and rightly so. Hey, we got Rocco's Fish Room. Hey, Rocco, welcome, man. I'm glad to see that you made it through the great blizzard down in Texas. Go up and see if I've missed anything else. I don't believe so. We have a comment from Chevy Fish. Chevy Fish mentions alum dip on new plants. Yes, that is not bad. What alum does is it actually paralyzes snails. Like the minute that you have a little bit of alum in water and you dip the plant in alum, you don't leave it in there long. Alum is really gnarly. It does not take long for that alum to just paralyze that snail. The snail will suck right back into its shell and it'll drop off that plant. Again, it doesn't have any effect on snail eggs, sadly. So let's see. Continuing on. Okay, so I covered diluted bleach. I covered sodium dichloroisocyanurate. The next thing I want to cover, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a warning before I show you what I have in my hand here. If you do not know how to handle this substance, if you haven't read about it, if you haven't read about and studied about, it's all over the internet, what it can and cannot be combined with and what it should and should not be combined with, do not use this substance if you do not know what you're doing, because it is a very, very powerful oxidizer, okay? I'm holding in my hand here pure lab grade potassium permanganate. Now, this is very, very useful, and it can be very, very dangerous. Again, like I said, it's an oxidizer. Do not get this on you. Do not get this on you. In fact, don't try this at home, folks. There's the disclaimer. Now, what this stuff is used for, it's used for a lot of different things. People use it to dip discus in, and when they're having kind of external parasite problems. It's used for a lot of different things. We're going to focus on using this, or rather explaining how this is used as a plant dip. It's very, very effective. Now, all you have to do is take very, very little, okay? If you're going to use this, have an adult with you, right, kids? Okay, we got to say that. Have an adult with you and be careful. Read up on this stuff. If you're going to use it, what you want to do is you want to just put some water, room temperature water, in a bucket. Fill the bucket up, doesn't have to be to the rim, okay? Very carefully open this with gloves on. Do not get it on your skin. It will oxidize you, it will burn you, and it will also stain your skin so that you're pink/purple for many, many moons. You can't see it through the bottle, but they look like black crystals. And as soon as you add it to water, it turns pink then purple like that really quickly. What you do is you add very, very small amounts to that water, like 1/8 of a teaspoon at a time. And then with some kind of a stirring stick or a spoon or something like that, you just stir it up. What you're shooting for is you want to add enough of this to turn it dark pink, okay? Not red, because that would take an insane amount to turn it anything like that. Usually, in fact, when it kind of turns red, its oxidizing capacity has been reached. But what you want to do is you want to add enough to the water to turn it a pretty decent dark pink, approaching purple, okay? Approaching a full-on purple. And then what you want to do is between 10 to 20 minutes, soak your plants in that solution. It should be room temperature. You don't want it too hot. You don't want it too cold. You soak your plants for 10 to 20 minutes in a solution of aqueous potassium permanganate. Now, remember what I said. This is a very powerful oxidizer. What it's going to do immediately is it's going to start taking out live snails, not snail eggs, right? It's going to start taking out live snails. It's going to immediately oxidize and kill and destroy planaria, hydra, bacteria, viri, tiny microscopic insects that it might be on the plant, anything external to that plant, it is going to pretty much take out, okay? Now, I touched on something. It does not affect snail eggs. I've tried it. It just doesn't affect snail eggs, guys. Now, there are ways to get rid of snails we're going to touch on in a second, but potassium permanganate is very, very effective to have for a lot of different reasons. Now, it's very effective as a plant dip, okay? And it's definitely much less harsh than bleach, and it's actually less harsh than sodium dichloroisocyanurate, which isn't particularly harsh, right? It's less harsh than that stuff. Sorry, I had to approve a message here, guys. But I see a comment there from W. Marion. Yep, W. Marion got it. Do not, if you're going to use this, do not spill it in your fish room. Do not spill it on anything. Do not spill the solution on anything that's that you care about, because it will absolutely stain the bejeepers out of anything you get that stuff on. But with that said, it's very effective as a plant dip. It's also very effective in a possibly a lower concentration. We're not going to get into dosing for fish. This is very, very effective as a dip for fish. It's also very, very effective in much lower quantities. As long as you turn off your filtration in your aquarium, it's very effective at actually cleaning aquariums out. In fact, a lot of discus breeding facilities, Jack Watley Discus, they're one of them, they exclusively use sodium I'm mixing my chemicals up. They exclusively use potassium permanganate in their aquariums to clean them out every once in a while. What they do is they add a certain amount of this, it turns the water pink, and the fish are still in the aquarium. They're still in there, right? They use a small amount of this in the aquarium. The water turns kind of faintly pink, a little pink, not too much, not nearly as much as high as you mix it when you're using it in a dip. And then after a short amount of time, you just change the water out. Or what Jack Watley Discus does, I know this for a fact, they add hydrogen peroxide into the same water that they have previously added potassium permanganate into. So what hydrogen peroxide will then do is completely and immediately neutralize this in the water. You will see it go from kind of it starts out pink, right? And as the potassium permanganate is breaking down the organics, literally cleaning the aquarium, right? Eating bacteria, eating mold, it's just breaking all kinds of stuff down. It slowly starts to fade, kind of, or change, I should say, from a light pink to a red, kind of red-brown. It's not a very nice color. It almost looks like leading up to the color you get with really good catappa leaves that you just added, right? It starts to turn that color. When you see that color, the potassium permanganate is oxidized. It's gone. It's not doing anything anymore. And at that point, you can add a small amount of hydrogen peroxide to that water, and before your eyes like magic, you will see that water turn crystal clear, and the tank will be nice and clean. No, W. Marion, potassium permanganate does not stain silicone in any tanks I've ever used it in. Perhaps if someone used it in very, very high doses, very high concentrations, perhaps then. I have not had that experience, luckily. And that's a major gripe that I have about ick medications, right? Stain your silicone. I have at least 4, 5, maybe 8 aquariums in this brand new shop already with blue silicone. So I just gave up on worrying about it. I just move on. Okay, guys, we're almost 15 minutes away from me shutting it down and opening this place up and getting started for the day. I'm going to move on. We've talked about 5% bleach, 95% tap water, right? Don't do that for any more than like 3 minutes, okay? Sodium dichloroisocyanurate, same thing, 2-3 minutes. You got to get out of there because chlorine can eventually start to melt leaves if you leave it in there too long. Talked about potassium permanganate. I usually leave my plants in there about 10 minutes. I've gone as high as 20, gotten away with it, especially if it's like Java fern or Boos or something like that. Those are pretty tough plants, pretty tough. They're not delicate, Rotala macrandra. They're certainly not some of these really delicate Rotalas. Now, we've talked about bleach, sodium dichloroisocyanurate, potassium permanganate, right? You can leave it in there 10-20 minutes. Now we're moving on to my favorite and my very, very strenuous suggestion to you all. Combine the two previous methods we talked about. We talked about first, quarantine. And then we talked about what? The pre-soak upon arrival. Do both, guys. Please, please, please listen to me and try it out. If you're a plant person, you order a lot of plants, especially if you're like me and you order cuttings of really rare stem plants. That's one of my big hobbies. I love getting in new stem plants, new cool floret plants that I've never kept before. And I used to buy 1-2 little cuttings and I get them in. Especially on those, you want to consider quarantining and, pre-soaking upon arrival and then quarantining. So let's talk about what that would look like. When you get the plant, right, all you want to do is soak your plants in potassium permanganate. Okay, now if it's a cutting that you got, right, like someone like literally gave you a cutting of a stem plant or maybe 2 or 3 of them, potassium permanganate will burn the wound on the plant, like where the cutting is, it will burn that. So you'll probably lose about 1/2 inch of the plant because it'll burn it up. Right? So when you take it out after soaking it for that 10 or 20 minutes, just cut the bottom inch or so off of that plant closest to the wound and get rid of it and save yourself the headache trying to figure out, wow, what's wrong with the bottom of this plant? I'm telling you right now what's up with the bottom of that plant. The potassium permanganate did burn the wound and it entered the plant a little bit. So all you do, you get your plant in, you do your potassium permanganate soak, just like I talked about, right? And then you take it out after your 10-20 minutes. 10 minutes is probably going to be enough. Take it out, rinse it, right? Rinse it under tap water. Just make sure it's not cold, it's not hot, just room temperature. Doesn't matter if it's chlorinated or not, right? and then place it into your plant quarantine tank. And remember, we talked about your plant quarantine tank, guys. Just because it's a quarantine tank doesn't mean that the plants in there don't need to eat. It doesn't mean they don't need CO2. They don't need a carbon source. They don't need good light. They don't need water column fertilization. They don't need substrate nutrition. They do, right? They do need all of those things in a quarantine tank. So please make sure that you've got that covered. Pop them in your quarantine tank for 2 weeks, okay? 2 weeks, not 1 day more, not 1 day less. And this is why. What happened is when you dipped your plant in the potassium permanganate solution, aqueous potassium permanganate, it killed all the pathogens, including the snails. But it did not even touch the snail eggs. And trust me, guys, you know Sod's Law, right? In the United States, we call it Murphy's Law. In the UK and overseas and Australia, they tend to call it Sod's Law. Sod's Law states that if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And something that can definitely go wrong is snail eggs on the plant that you just dipped and you thought was all clean because you looked it over. If your eyesight's like mine, you're going to miss snail eggs, man. Some of them are really small. Some are very cleverly hidden. That is why you put it in your tank for 2 weeks, right? Because in less than 2 weeks, the bladder snail eggs, the pond snail eggs, whatever's on there, they're going to hatch. And after they hatch, and this is the reason why I said do not wait more than 2 days or more than 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks. I'm talking 2 weeks on the money. That is because that is the perfect timing for any snail eggs that have been on those plants to hatch, but not enough time for those new baby snails to lay eggs of their own. They cannot immediately lay eggs. Bladder snails and pond snails cannot immediately lay eggs. It's not possible. So what you do then after 2 weeks, right, you take that plant, cuttings, whatever it is, you take it out, you retreat it in your potassium permanganate. Not what you mixed up before. That's already gone. You need to mix up some new potassium permanganate, right? Just like you did the first time, and you treat your plant. That's all you do. You just treat it in potassium permanganate. 10 minutes is going to be more than enough. And then you take it out and you rinse it under tap water, and then you put that plant wherever you want because it's truly clean. You're going to be in great shape if you do that. So you get plants, new arrivals, pre-soak them in potassium permanganate, get them out of there, rinse them, quarantine tank, 2 weeks to the day. On that 14th day, at the end of that 14th day, take them out of that tank, round number 2 in your potassium permanganate, then rinse them and get them into their forever home, which is hopefully going to be a beautiful planted tank, a beautiful aquascape, and whatever you're working on. So that is about that about covers us for this live stream. I want to talk a little bit about, I kind of feel like, well, I mean, I don't feel like it. It's just simply the truth. Fish and shrimp definitely get all of the quarantine spotlight. There's no question about it. However, for reasons that I talked about, right, the fact that fish technically kind of have a secondary external immune system, something that we don't have, right? Because of that reason, it's a real shame that plant quarantining and plant soaking and that sort of thing, it's a real shame that so much of that is missed because for the reasons that we talked about, plants can technically be much better disease vectors in your fish room than fish can. So with that, I'm going to jump over into chat and do a little quick scroll up if I can get my mouse to respond. There we go. Hey, looks like we have Danikin Aquatics. What's up, my brother? Thanks so much. Aquaballs, Paul Sotero, Fish and Floral. Nice. A lot of new names in here. I'm loving it. Thank you so much, guys, for coming by. I'm going to go on ahead and scroll up and see if I've missed anything. Hey, The Secret History Living in Your Aquarium, my buddy Alex. How you doing, my friend? Thanks so much for coming by. Alex hits us with a really cool comment here, and I'm going to be Googling this. Alex says, you got to Google Bacopa caroliniana gold nanoparticles and artificial photosynthesis. an insane new study how they can make artificial light and liquid hydrogen fuel in Bacopa. Wow. That is definitely, I'm going to get right on that, man. That is right up my alley. That's the sort of thing that I absolutely live for, that really super nerdy science stuff. It's so awesome. Thanks for the comment, man. I am definitely going to dig into that. We got a question here, looks like from W. Marion. W. Marion asks, have you ever shown your planted tanks on the channel? Yes, I have. If you go onto my channel, there's not tons of it. My channel's only been up for a little bit over a year, so I have not been doing this that long. I've come a long ways, I think, for just a little bit over a year. A lot more work to be done, though. But no, W. Marion, if you go to my channel and scroll back through my some of my live streams, my older live streams, as well as some of the older posted content, I should say, you will see that there's some definite farm tank videos, some planted tanks, some aquascaping stuff on there. Feel free, check it out. Filigree Aquatics, what's the dosage on the spa shock stuff? Very, very little, very little. So I will tell you, if you want to use the spa shock in 1 liter of water, all you need is no more than about a quarter teaspoon. A quarter of a teaspoon in 1 liter of water is more than enough to prove utterly fatal to any kind of pathogen whatsoever, any kind of pathogen, virus, hydra, planaria, it'll take them out. This stuff tends to take out snails pretty good too. Now, I will admit that I have caught a couple of snails that have somehow made it through the leisure time dip treatment. It's not very common, but I have had a couple that have slipped through. I have definitely had plenty of pond snails and bladder snail eggs, and bladder snail eggs that have survived the leisure treatment spa stuff. Now, something I wanted to touch on, okay, before I end the live stream, I want to warn people, okay, a preemptive warning. This might cause you to start kind of doing some searching on Google, like how to kill eggs. Guys, I'm misspeaking all over the place today. Please forgive me. How to kill snails in your aquarium. Okay, and you're eventually going to come up against a post that's absolutely right, that somebody's absolutely right about. And this is what the post is going to say. Well, anytime I want to get rid of unnecessary, unwanted snails, I use X. And X is always some kind of copper-based medication. Extremely effective at killing snails. And also very effective at killing shrimp, okay? Invertebrates do not like copper. Now, this is the warning. I'm not warning you about, oh, you got to take out your neorites, you got to take out your monos, you got to take out your neocaridina and your caridina shrimp, your Pinocchio shrimp, whatever it is you have. No, here's the warning. Copper is extremely toxic to plants, and all plants. It is true that all plants need tiny, tiny, tiny small amounts of copper as a super trace element. Anything more than that will begin to impact the plant's health, okay? And anything more than that will utterly kill plants in very, very short order. So I want to give you that warning, that word of advice. If you come across some kind of a blog post or discussion forum post, and they're saying all you got to do is get some cupramine from Seachem or whatever it is, whoever makes that stuff. I don't even use it. But all you got to do is throw some in there, pow, all your snails are gone. Very true, and all your plants are gone too. I mean, I'm talking, once you've dosed a tank with copper and the plants have been in there for, let's say, an hour, they're done. They don't look like they're done, but trust me, they're done. They're going to be melting and just falling to pieces in very short order, and you're going to be very disappointed. So I wanted to give you guys that little word of warning. Please read up on potassium permanganate. Okay, it's pretty easy to find. They use it in green sand beds, in recharging green sand beds, which has to do with water filtration for well water. So you can find this stuff a lot of times It's your local hardware store. Now, I would, if you want to try potassium permanganate, again, I've said it many times, read up on it. There's a lot of things you can't combine this with. You cannot combine this with glycerine or glycol. If you combine potassium permanganate with anything that contains glycerine or glycol, within 30 to 45 seconds, it will explode. Yes, it will burst into fire. Boom! It will cause a huge fire if you are not careful with this stuff. So again, read up on it. There are certain things that you absolutely cannot combine it with. But if you feel comfortable with it, it can be a very, very useful tool to use in your fish room or your fish shop. We have a question here from Passionate Fruit. Can you show the Corydoras nanus that you have and give an accurate approximation of the current size? Well, let me see if I can. They hang around in the back quite a bit. Passionate Fruit, I'll go on ahead and show you some nanus Corydoras here in a second. W. Marion here with a comment. Can you type the full name of the chemical in the sodium treatment? Sure. This is the abbreviation. Okay. The whole name is sodium dichloroisocyanurate. Hey, look at that. I didn't even mistype it. It's amazing. It's a miracle. Okay, so let me switch over and get the walkabout cam, and I'm going to go over and see if I can rustle up some Corydoras nanus for Passionate Fruit. Hey, look at that. Hi, y'all. And then let me change the mic settings. Bear with me just one moment, y'all. Forgive me, the walkabout cam mic is very, very hissy indeed. How about that? Yeah. Nice and hissy. All right, let's go over and see if we can find us some Corydoras nanus. They're down here in tank number 26. Let me switch the camera. They're way in the back. See them down there? A little cloudiness going on in this tank today. Let me see if I can force them up to closer to the camera. You can check them out. They're really small little guys. Right there at the front, guys. See them swimming away? Not very sociable today. There's one way over there, kind of in the corner. So as you can see, I would say they're a touch over an inch long, maybe an inch and a quarter, something like that. And while I've got the walkabout cam fired up, I just got to show you guys how wonderful these amazing blue Gularis killifish turned out. I've been feeding them like crazy. Actually, the Sarah granured cichlid tab, the Nature granured cichlid tab, and check these guys out. Look at these glorious fish. These are blue Gularis killifish. Really, really beautiful ones are males. If I can get this thing to focus, that would be great. There's a younger male there. There's one of the big boys. So this big boy and this big girl up here have been breeding in this aquarium, believe it or not. They're big time substrate gravel breeders. But anyway, I just wanted to give you guys a little peek of these gorgeous blue Galeras killifish. Since we were already over here, you know, showing off the Corydoras nanus, which unfortunately we're not feeling at all sociable today. What can you do? Oh, well, while I'm over here, guys, let me give you a shot of the backside. This is the new, what would you call it? Row, the double row, I guess you could call, that we've finally gotten built out here. Check it out. Got our 640 breeders here, all of the filtrations ready to be staged, our lights, you got our wonderful Finnick Stingray 2s on top. As you can see, they are really bright. We've got our space here carved out for our bettas. Got all of our hoods and alternating colored sand laid out. A lot of progress. I'm feeling pretty good about it. Well, guys, I want to thank you all for coming by and hanging out with me on Saturday. Surely there are a lot of other things that you could have chosen to do with your weekend, your Saturday, I should say. But I really appreciate it. I'm very appreciative that you guys have come by to hang out with me. It really does mean a lot to me. The channel's come a long way in a short amount of time, and it's because of you guys. It's not because of me. It's not because of this shop. It's because of you guys. And I just want to take a moment to thank you and to thank all of my moderators for everything that you've done for me so far. It means a lot to me. So with that said, guys, I am going to wrap it up. I wish you all peace, love, and much happy fish keeping. And we'll see you next Saturday right here at Redfish Bluefish. Take care.